Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Raphael Onjoka. I'm from the University of Louisville, Kentucky. I've been charged to be the moderator of today's program. My job is to introduce Professor Falola. Unfortunately, Professor Falola doesn't need introduction. Actually, I'm the one that needs introduction. So that's the irony of my task this evening. But before I introduce him, I want to say that after his lecture, I'm going to be the one moderating those who will be asking questions. So I'll be over there moderating your questions. Well, so as I said, Professor Falola doesn't need introduction, so I'm not going to introduce him. What I'm going to do is for us to celebrate his achievements. So it's not an introduction at all. Professor Falola is the Francis Higginbotham Centennial Professor of History at the University of at the University of Texas at Austin. He is a highly respected African-born achiever. He came from a generation of professors who were notable for their excellence and high level of achievement. He's a fellow of Nigerian Academy of Letters, has been the receiver of numerous awards, too many to mention. The latest of these awards, which was conferred on him last month, was the University of Austin at Texas research professor. And he is the first professor in the social sciences and humanities to win that award. It has been an award more or less exclusively reserved for those in the sciences. So in this sense, since the start of the U of T at Austin, Professor Falola is the first person to win the award. As if that is not enough, he is the series editor of more than four books. One of them, the University of Rochester African and African Diaspora series. He's also the co-editor of Journal of Economic History. He is also the series editor of Carolina Academic African and African Diaspora series. He is also the series editor of Culture and Customs of Africa, published by the Greenwood Press. In total, Professor Falola had published more than 100 books. And this is the first time in my life I have heard of anybody publish more than 100 books. Not only publishing 100 books also, he has also published more than 420 journal papers and articles. In fact, when I counted 420, I stopped counting because then there is no need to continue counting. In relation to the theme of this conference, Professor Falola was also the co-editor of Health, Knowledge, and Belief Systems in Africa, which was published in 2008. His scholarships have received awards from government. They have received awards from institutions, from universities, from NGOs, from students, and from colleagues. He has contributed to the study of health and illnesses in Africa and the diaspora. He has contributed to the understanding of Achebe and the Afibo and the Ubu Kalu and the others. His works, which also touch on African intellectual history, African diaspora history, Masque and Masquerades of Africa and the African diaspora, African nationalism and colonialism, have been a resource of knowledge. One of his best books for me was just an aspect of his life history, which is entitled A Mouth Sweeter Than Salt. This book was published by the University of Wisconsin. The book has won numerous awards. The book alone guarantees Professor Falola immortality in the field of academics. The book, although it was written as a life history, but through his life experience, we could be able to understand the dynamics between colonialism and post-colonial society in Nigeria and Africa in general. Professor Falola, you have won in your chosen field a source of inspiration and enlightenment for others. Long after the rich man's wealth or the soldier's rank and bayonet has passed into a limbo of time, your writings and teachings and mentorship and those you have mentored and trained will continue to remember you. We may therefore welcome the great African of our time, Professor Toyin Falola, please.
Thank you very much, and I have to let the audience know that I did not pay him for that introduction. He did it very willingly. I'm an historian, and one of the things that I've enjoyed in this conference is to understand different mindsets. So the mindsets I've been listening to, they are completely different from mine, just as what I'm going to say may be different from yours. I've done books on health, actually, child health, political economy of health, belief system, like 6 books on health. But they do not come close to what we have been talking about in the last 2 days. I called my wife, I said, look, I think they wanted to invite you, not me, because she's a practitioner. My daughter is a practitioner. So why did they invite me instead of my daughter and my wife? But I'm already here. And I can't go back. Well, we have 2 Nigerians here. They've never been to the US, and this is their first time of coming. Kevin and the professor, and on behalf of the conference, I want to give them a souvenir that they can take back home just to mark their first visit to the US. Welcome, and thanks for joining us. Thank you very much. When you go back home, let's tell them that we are welcome. So welcome. It's a long journey, and one of the problems with international conferences like this is they arrived 2 days ago, but they have to go tomorrow. So that I told them that next time maybe they should tell people like us so that at least we integrate them to our families. We were able to show them around instead of just spending. I was even crying in my room because you can't just come for 3 days. I'm sorry. What I want to do is, I'm so sorry because I get emotional too. I want to talk about cultural issues that affect the mindset of patients and how the cultures of the past affect some of the things we do, and how these cultures affect things that are non-Western, because this conference has been non-Western, and how when people talk about crisis, people always talk about this crisis without posing the question, okay, how do people survive the crisis? So you may be reading about Brazil or Nigeria, and then they will say something. In Ghana, they live on $1 per day. But why don't you ask the question? If somebody gives you $1 per day, you're going to die. Why are they alive? Because we all know that $1 a day cannot. Nobody can survive on $1 a day. And when you transfer cultures, when you adopt ideas from other places, you have to translate them. So although we talk about African Christianity and talk about African Islam, bear in mind that these are projects of translation. They're projects of translation in the sense that they won't work if you don't translate them to your culture. There's no way Christianity will work if Africans had not translated it. And that in the attempt to translate Christianity or Islam or Western medicine or anything, that translation is possible because they are trying to draw from a template of the past. For instance, if you were to go to any African church, say in the US, and you compare your experience with an American church, many of the differences will be shaped around the extent to which cultures of the past have been translated. So you cannot go to an African church in Austin and they are not going to talk about witches. That's not going to be possible. So the witches have left Nigeria, they cross the Atlantic, and they're in Austin, and they're in Atlanta. Why? Because the pastor is drawing from the template of the past. Similarly, you can't talk about, say, Islam and say, to what extent have the Igbo or the Ugandans or Nigerians turned it into a local project? They have successfully done that. In the early years of the missionary enterprise, the contestation was about the evil, about the demon, in which, in the attempt to spread Christianity from clothes to songs to medicine to food, they demonize them. They call them demons. So you can't play African drums, you can't sing, you can't dance, because then that's not Christianity. And for those of you who come from a different kind of nuclear family, there was a long debate running into almost 40 years on how many wives can a man have to see God. So when they structured monogamy as an avenue to seeing God, that led to the creation of African independent churches. Because they said that you can't say somebody has 2 wives is not going to see God. So my father had 4 wives. He was a church person. I was in the choir for 11 years. You cannot tell my father with 4 wives that he's not going to see God. He's not going to accept that proposition. And rather than saying we are going to be excluded from seeing God, then they decided to set up their own churches and began to translate it. So part of the biggest expansion, some people will argue, whether it's the Catholic Church, Pentecostalism, the Anglican Church, lies in Africa. That is where it's been the most extensive. Pentecostalism has redefined the meaning of Christianity in Africa, with choruses, with singing, with drumming. And now the point which they reach is now to say they want to take Christianity to a dark continent. Do you know where the dark continent is? Waco and Austin. The agenda of African Christianity is now to reform the West. So they're actually pumping so much money as a project in doing this. The Redeemed Church is emphatic that you people have to be reformed because you are pagans. It's just a missionary project. And so it has Christianity in Africa is so conservative, whether it comes to gays and lesbians, abortion, condom. It's a no-go area. It's so conservative that some of you are shocked. And for those of you who follow the debate in the Anglican Church, the Africans, they said, let's break up the church. Let's break it up. Just because they're so conservative, they're so far to the right. My wife is Catholic. I am Church of England. When my wife's father came and we took him to a Catholic church, she said he's not going back anymore. That this is not a church. Why? Because the pastor said, the reverend said, look, the only person you should help are children and adults who cannot help themselves. And my father-in-law cannot reconcile with that kind of preaching. That you can't say that. And he said I should take him to the Reverend Father, and they had an argument for 2 hours based on the notion of African kinship, generosity, social experience, and the same thing you find in application to medicine. So that the mindset by which people are talking here in terms of compassion, these are things they've already taken for granted. They've taken them for granted, that they've taken sharing for granted. The last month I left Nigeria, I was feeding 14 people in my house. It's been taken for granted. Every month that I get paid, I go to Western Union. That's already taken for granted, that you cannot spend your salary by yourself. So many of these messages that I've been listening to in the last 2 days are things that from a kinship model have already been taken for granted, in which you can't just say somebody is sick, you're not suffering with the person. The entire, we did a whole panel on that. That's already taken for granted. So Western medicine in Africa has had to respond to African traditional and religious notions of health and well-being. Because medication is one thing, the mind and spiritual forces are another. Most people in Africa balance the reality of medication with those of cultural values. Hospitals cannot replace the homes. Dependence on families are more important than having health and life insurance. They don't exist in many places. So what you have as an insurance is just your family. And to many, believing prayer is regarded as superior to any medication or prescription. Indeed, where faith is strong, a woman without womb believes that she can still have a child. That's the truth. You cannot tell somebody that you cannot have a child, irrespective of the previous errors. They just simply believe that God will give you another womb. When God is ready, He is ready to forgive you. And the most virulent form of cancer is curable. So the doctor can tell you you have pancreatic cancer, but the church can tell you that you are not going to die. That is just. In other words, cancer is not something that is not curable. You die because God says it's time for you to die. As Nigerian Christians are fond of saying, illness is not my portion, death is not my portion. That statement, you hear it almost every day. Nothing is someone's portion if spiritual forces are available to counter diseases, bad health, or other problems. Rather than be afraid of death itself, which has been a subject of conversation here in the last 2 days, values and ideas have been created to conquer death and to seek the means to become ancestors in afterlife. Those who have earned the right to die, because you can earn the right to die in many African cultures, by virtue of attaining old age or having children and grandchildren, are expected to have natural death, to age with grace, and to leave this world with dignity. Only the wicked person, as many people believe, who have bad things to account for, should be afraid of death. And that's a fundamental difference in the way some of these cultures are put together. I'm going to draw my idea from the Yoruba people of southwestern Nigeria, and some of the ideas you find in Cuba, Brazil, parts of the US, as part of the Atlantic migration. And I'm not going to be talking about Western medicine. Rather, I'll be talking about issues of culture as they affect Western medicine. The cultural characteristics are very common, and some of them have been walked back. They've been retained in spite of change over the centuries. Yoruba religious practices, which you also find adopted by Islam and Christian Pentecostalism, tend to be more pragmatic than idealistic, with a desire to solve life's problems. To seek rewards here on earth, why not jeopardizing the rewards of afterlife? While the penetration of Islam and Christianity have reshaped some of this thinking, but at the same time, they've provided more of a blend of meeting the desire of the living and also seeking heavenly rewards. To fully enjoy life, even if one was seeking salvation in heaven, Yoruba religion preaches the benefits of good health, wealth, and children. And children, it's something that we should talk about, because without children, it becomes a problem. Religion itself becomes a problem. It's a society where the preference is you must have a child. It is not negotiable. Life can be presented as wasted and unkind without children. And for those of us who study polygamy, we see how this belief in the past fueled the idea of 2 wives and 3 wives. Today is being condemned and criticized, but bear in mind where you have a high infant mortality rate and where you don't understand the nature of disease, the only guarantee you have, if you must have a child, is to have many. Because before the age of 5, many kids will die. So if you think you want to die and be left with 2 children, you better have 10. Because if you have 2, you may lose the 2 of them. And how do you have 10 children? You marry 1 or 2 wives, or 2 or 3 wives or more. The connections between Yoruba belief systems and health are so clear-cut, and this is the way it works. Religious goals must come with fertility and energy. This is the children. So you can't say, I'm doing this without this one. This connection. And then you need this energy. Now, this fertility, your children, and this energy will let you have good life. And then this good life will give you good death. And then this good death will guarantee you into ancestorhood. You want to become an ancestor. A point that I'm going to explain. So these connections, you don't approach this from, say, Christianity or Islam. It's not going to work that way. But the interesting thing is that modern Christianity and Islam, in a number of places, they've tried to actually follow, in some ways, some of these connections. Various practices and ideas show the linkages between the worldview, health, and dignity, human dignity. The religion, most especially divination practices, attempt to reveal the complexity of the future in a way to create peace of mind and resolve tension in society. Death does not terminate humanity, meaning that the agonies attached to it as a passage of life is mediated by an elaborate conception of afterlife. There's an established concept of ancestors and afterlife, manifested in masquerades. And our chair, he knows this subject more than me because he's written on issues of masquerades, how the notion of masquerades represents the rebirth of human beings whom you no longer see. Culture, defined and lived, cannot be fragmented into autonomous pieces. Religion and medicine are interconnected, creating a web with ethics, philosophy, music, metaphysics, and many more. Some will say that religion is central to culture, the start and end point to understand it. The essentials of the religion have been studied, but the basic point is that you cannot take religion outside of anything. So you can't take it outside of the understanding of economic institutions, outside of politics, outside of conventions. So it's so integral to the way they think about so many issues. I want to break these things down by just telling you the governing principles in relation to the connections with health, concepts of dignity and ethics, which are all linked to ideas of religion. Social duties are not secular. They do not secularize what we call social duties. And that's a concept that we must bear in mind because they see them as religious. For instance, a burial ceremony is a mandatory social duty. An illness preceding death requires health care defined as religious obligations. In other words, they are not giving you a choice. You don't have a choice. Using the Christian salvation pattern to study Yoruba religion may be very misleading. Rites, rituals, and symbols talk about this world, offering elaborate guidelines on how to survive daily struggles, conflicts, disease, and disasters. The religion is not silent about the world that you cannot see, but not without connecting it to success in the world that you can see. Here are the principles, and I will break them down for members of this audience in a very simple manner. First, life and health are intertwined. The religion must ensure orderly life and healthy living. If religion fails to bring order, life itself collapses. Life must supply the energy to survive, succeed, and function. Second, the transition from life to death is not only smooth, but constructed as part of an interrelated process. The philosophy is to see the world as a marketplace and heaven as home. To summarize how our experience is a preparation for the non-worldly. In a multi-stage approach, the challenges of life must be met, but not at the expense of the continuity with afterlife. One needs wisdom and money to solve the problems of here and now, but good character and community ethos to achieve peaceful transition to the afterlife. To solve earthly problems, one must have a transcendental view of religion. The individual must not do things to displease God, the ancestors, and the idea that spirits, what a member of this audience is calling demons, can create havoc. Then a third principle, we cannot succeed on our own or maintain healthy emotional living on our own without insertion into communities and kinship. We cannot do so as autonomous individuals. Whoever wants to maintain good health and good living must ensure that other members of the family enjoy the same. Individuals have to carry the weight and burden of others. The care system, as in the religious system, operates with elaborate family and kinship network system. Prayer for good life and health involves prayer to be part of a network of people. In other words, you can't just say, give me good health, without saying, give me a community, or give me good people. I think that would be very strange to them. As people pray for good health, they pray to have children and for the family size to grow as it creates the force and the vitality of life. So if you're praying for good health and good death, you must pray for your size to grow. The size of your family has to grow. Daily and repetitive saying warns individual not to disregard other people. And if use a concept of becoming naked, that you are a naked person when you cut off from people, you become naked. When you behave strangely, you are written off as a malevolent ghost. They will say your body has been dispossessed of its soul. In other words, you and I, the assumption is that there's a soul we don't see, and that our essence, man's essence, not the physiognomy or the physical body. By implication, without that soul, you are a walking body, a ghost, or a dead person. For the first condition of life itself is a concept of Lafayette, which can be broken down to good health, peace of mind, and you must strive to avoid conflict. Try not to get engaged in too many conflicts. Lafayette will open the door to all the good things in life. Without drawing from all the forces of religion and values, an individual cannot enjoy Lafayette. As I'm going to point out later on, without attaining old age, one cannot become an ancestor. And without becoming an ancestor, one faces unpredictable complications in afterlife. The fifth principle, the line of kinship must not be broken between the generation that was gone and the current, and with the unborn. Africans have been criticized for this one sentence. They have been overly criticized by the Europeans for this desire not to break the chain. Because in the process of trying to do this, they created all sorts of marriage practices, so many marriage forms. For instance, I don't know my dad because he died when I was 5 months old. And I did not know my mom until until I was 10. Why? Because she was asked to marry my father's brother, and she refused. So in patriarchal system, the child belongs to the father. So they said, well, if you don't want to marry from within, you have to leave our family, which she did. And then we became reconnected much later. The point is, in the attempt to say, we want to retain this kinship line, you don't want to break it, because the person you need not to break this chain is a child. So in the 19th, 18th century, they invented all sorts of marriage forms, levirate, widow inheritance, widow marriage, so that you have a son or you have a daughter who will keep this kinship going. Because once you break it, and you think only the people of the past are worried. I'm also worried myself as we speak. 2 of my children are married, but they have not produced a granddaughter or a grandson. I keep telling them, are you not going to produce something? That this Falola family is going to go into extinction. And my strategy is not working. So I've been saying, look, I already know my own children, which is you. And when I'm dead and you don't have kids, you're the one who is going to break up your own chain, and I'm not responsible. One day I got so much fearful, I flew to New York to my son. I said, are you not going to have a child one day? So reproduction maintains this connection. Thus, the most disturbing problem is that of childlessness. And we have a pastor here that this disturbing problem, it drives so many women to churches. It's responsible for many marriage breakdown. It's the number one cause of divorce in Africa. You can't say, I'm getting married and I don't have a child. Bear in mind, they don't have an adoption culture. And it's just beginning. But they don't have it the way you structure it here. And it's a very big problem. I don't agree with many of the consequences, but I know that it creates a severe pressure that the pastor should talk about to this audience, because I'm sure he will have dealt with many of these issues. The widely held belief, the reward of life is to have children, supplies an organizing principle to explain health and dignity. There's a pyramid of desire. Children are on top of that pyramid of desire, followed by health. See that desire, that have children. If you are given an option, should you have cancer or should you have a child, you will pick a child. Long life and wealth. A wealthy person without children is seen as having lived a wasted life. See? And that's a fundamental premise. You can't say I'm a multi-millionaire and I don't have a child. A poor person with children is richer than the wealthy person without children. Children must take care of their elders. See, so when you read in the newspaper that an African loses a child, it is never a good idea in any part of the world to lose a child. But the differences are so many. You say, when a mother loses a child in Africa, you are not just losing a human being, you are losing your insurance. You are losing your investment. You are losing your status in community. You are losing so many things. Things that child represents for you. If you ask any African you meet, say in the US, who is taking care of your mom or your dad, that's the person you meet. So every month we have to send money home for my wife's mom, just to keep her going, because they don't have a retirement system whereby you're saving money every month that you can spend in your old age. So that these losses are social, economic, and political, and your entire status can get diminished. In the 19th, 18th century, you have to outproduce your neighbors. You have to outproduce them. Because bear in mind, they were not counting success and wealth by money. You are counting it by people, or you are counting it by cattle. But you can't say wealth means you have people. You have wealth translates to how many children do you have? 20. That's wealth. And it carries enormous social significance. And some of these have been carried over Now they don't have many children. They're like everywhere, but the significance remains. Having children is both an investment and an insurance, the most reliable source of emotional support and capital. Without children, what you call health becomes compromised. The search for the good things of life becomes negated. The end of life itself becomes very depressing, sometimes regarded as a failure. Anyone with children in this thinking cannot actually die. So, and that's a fundamental premise in which children buy you immortality. So you can't say I have 4 children but I'm dead. That's a contradiction. Because the assumption is that since you have created this chain of continuity with your children, you no longer can die. You can be removed physically, but you can't say you're dead. Mortality has been purchased by having children. The mortal curse can be imposed on children who abandon their parents at old age. You do not want your mother to curse you. It's a very serious thing. Not just your mom, your neighbors can also impose a curse on you if you don't take care of your parents when they're sick, and if you do not fund them when they have no jobs or when they have passed the retirement age. I do a lot of counseling for young people here. If you run across Africans, especially those who are about to date, people interpret the fear as a race issue. It is not an issue of race, that the Nigerian person does not want the son to marry, say, an American. It's not a race issue. It's a fear issue. It's the fear of the nursing home. They don't want to go to a nursing home. They want to live with their children. So they have the assumption that, look, I have only one son. This son is going to marry a Chinese. I'm going to become 80 years old, and I cannot live with them. That fear is so real. It's so real. I've been a chair at a wedding. I do a lot of community service. They will ask me to come and preside over a wedding. And I attended one in Dallas, and the parents of this gentleman, they were not happy at the wedding. I said, why are you not happy? Then I went to their home. I said, what's wrong? He said, look, my son is married. How do I tell the wife that in 10 years' time, I'm no longer going to work? Would they let me live with them? And I said, well, why don't you discuss it? Or why don't you sell your house and buy a small house near their house? If you run across any African and the person offends you, just say, when you get to old age, you will go to a nursing home. That is seen like a mortal curse that you can impose on anyone. The very fact that they dread that so much. Now, how do these governing principles, how do they affect healthcare? The spread of Western education, world religions, Western medicine have all combined to present traditional values and practices as anachronistic. They've condemned them. They've condemned the wisdom of the elders, the wisdom of diviners, the wisdom of the ideas. They've seen magic as evil. They've seen so many aspects of these cultures as bad without understanding what they're trying to say. Even herbs, plants that modern medicine have also repackaged, that they've had for centuries, they've also criticized them. And they've criticized the concept of causation because health issues, medicine issues, they have a different principle of causation, different from what Western medicine and Western knowledge have treated us, have shown us. Because they're not just dealing with sciences of diseases, but they are also dealing with spiritual forces that cause diseases and trouble the minds. This line, African Christianity, African Islam, have also adopted it. The belief is that spiritual forces and fate, destiny, can cause problems and they have to be attacked. As the practitioners themselves explain it, there's an inescapable, I'm quoting them, religious dimension both to the enjoyment of good health and to the disturbing experience of illness. The recognition does not mean that the practitioners do not know the differences between medicine and magic, but that there are needs to combine both in some situations. In many languages, the words for both medicine and magic is the same. Ogun. But what both do is not the same, even if the desire is to produce a holistic effect. The Ogun that applies to medicine is often qualified as Ogun Iwosan. That is the medicine to cure and to prevent illness or to tend to a sick person. That is the application of knowledge and science to cure, both the therapeutic and the prophylactic. The herbalists receive a long training in this regard, and they do know, within the cumulative knowledge available to them, the linkage between plants, herbs, and medicine and diseases. If a disease is regarded as complicated or attributable to non-scientific reasons, Ogun in form of magic can take over to attack the non-therapeutic origins. The objective of magic, I'm putting magic in quotes, are to meet the non-therapeutic needs and fear of individuals grounded in faith and belief. And what modern Christianity and Islam have actually done is also to borrow from this template. For instance, the psalm that you read is treated as medicine. It's a prescription. It's treated as if you've seen a medical doctor, in which they can actually ask you to recite a specific psalm with the belief that it will serve the same purpose that the magic of the past would do. Or the Muslims will take a passage of the Quran, they will write it down, and they will turn it into an amulet and ask you to be wearing it. It's a passage that they take from the Quran, in which the idea is that words, that those psalms are so powerful that it can cure any form of disease. And the template is to draw from the past and invest the Bible with that power that you call magic. So the way they read many of these passages sometimes are different from the way some of us in this part of the world read them. There's an elaborate form of protection, avoiding troubles, and overcoming instant dangers. And Pentecostalism stressed all these aspects. That when you wake up, try to protect your body, avoid trouble, and overcome dangers. And you need spiritual forces to do this. In whatever form, no medication is prescribed without asking about the larger issues of your state of mind, the social setting, your feelings, your relationship with others in the kinship and the community. The idea is that once you fracture your relationship with your neighbors and members of your family, you can have diseases. You can actually become sick. So the premise is, did you fight anyone yesterday? Because if you fight someone yesterday, you can have a headache today. And they warn you in the compound that, look, be very, very careful. Because if you fought someone yesterday and the person dies today, you are the one who killed the person. It is not, you are responsible for that death. And they warn you, try to mediate your relationship with people, because if anything happens to them, you can be held responsible. There's the understanding of the disease itself, which they do, although this does not undermine the possibility that disturbance in life may be a major factor. They can do rituals, which they do. For the non-spiritual discovery, sometimes they can do divination, which they do. People have also condemned divination, but if you study contemporary Christianity and Islam in Africa, they also borrow from this divination aspect. The pastor can foretell your future. The Pentecostalism, you can foretell your future. When I use an example that I like the most. When I finished my high school, I was admitted into 5 universities for 5 different courses, including law. And when I was asking, which one should I do? My mom said, no, you cannot answer that question. I'm going to do it myself. You know what she did? She went to a pastor. So the pastor said, what are these courses? Law, public administration, political science, history. The pastor said, I'm going to pray for 7 days, which he did. And he said, God has revealed to me your son will be a great historian. Not that I believe it as a secularist now, but you can never tell my mom that I'm successful without that pastor. Until she died. In fact, she said I must do something for her before she died. I must send her to Jerusalem to go on the pilgrimage. Because he said, look, and whenever I was giving her money after my PhD, she kept giving this pastor the tithe that I gave her. Because she just associated my success in life to that revelation. And even anytime I wanted to make her angry, I would say, no, this pastor is not responsible. I studied hard. I was working for 18 hours. I said, no. There's a difference between studying hard and becoming successful. And if you had gone to law school, you'd be a failure. If you had done that, you would have been a failure. And that's what she believed till she died. She just believed that divine revelation by this pastor she took these 5 alternatives to is what has made me to be successful today. Can Africans divorce these 3 elements, rituals, medication, and trying to know about the future? It's very difficult. It's been very difficult. Now, this is a divination of the past, but the translation of world religions has element of it in various forms. They came from Nigeria, they got visa to come. You see, visa to you, the visa to travel, looks like just a simple document. When they invite you to the embassy, people go to pastors, they go to priests. In front of the American embassy in Lagos, there are pastors who pray for you before you present your document. Just for you to even get a visa to come to Baylor to attend a lecture. Some people go to a praying, they fast 21 days. So that when they appear before the immigration officer, they will not deny them visa. These are realities. But they are realities based on a mindset. In which trying to divorce medication from belief, from rituals, from all sorts of mindset, it's in theory, it's difficult. Western medicine is not interested in all these components, which is why those who operate in the mindset of faith and belief seek out traditional healers, Pentecostalist priests, Islamic pastors with healing power. Even in hospitals in Africa, the church is embedded in it. Even in modern hospital, in teaching hospital, they pray before they start. These are secularized institutions. And the doctor will tell you, look, I'm just an agent of God. My medicine may work, my medicine may not work. Sometimes they will just tell you that. When we almost lost our first son, and the doctor said, I will try, but look, if God wants you to have a son, you are going to have a son. If God does not want you to have a son, whatever we do will not work. Well, it's a mindset in which they're saying that science and knowledge, they are not dismissing them, but at the same time, you cannot dismiss some of these beliefs. To cure disease and for the mind to be at peace, Medicine involves more than the use of drugs, but the appeasement of spiritual forces, spiritual atonement, and the application of rituals to ward off evils. The mind, body, and medicine are coordinated. And the cure to any disease, they believe, has to do with all the three of them. The body can be injured by diseases, but the mind too can be damaged by words, by curses, by actions of enemies. A mind that is damaged by witches and sorcerers, as they believe, cannot have a body free of diseases. How can the secrets of the mind be discovered when an individual does not even know them? And this is where the pastors come into it. As to medicine itself, it's abundantly clear that they have a profound knowledge of the uses of plants and of animals to cure various ailments, minor and major. And this morning there was a talk by the chair on plants, and this knowledge is very well established that it's not as if they do not know many of these things or they do not know their scientific impact. They actually do. And various studies have shown that they know about plants. What they know about plants is similar to what they also know about plants in other parts of the world. The big difference is this one, is incantations. These incantations are definitions. What these incantations do is that one plant can serve multiple purposes. One herb can serve multiple purposes if you know how to do these incantations with this plant. So this is scientific, but the science can be expanded through this. And there's so many ideas and so many knowledge. Say, if you've been to many African churches, they no longer call these incantations. They call them something else. So for instance, you can take a bottle of water and take a right passage in the Bible and invoke those passages on that water. The belief is that that water you drink has curative power. It's very common. I do not know the number of times my mom would go and collect this water for me to drink. So after a while, I stopped talking to her about competition at work because she got worried. Promotion, tenure, she would just get worried and go and collect this water for me to drink. Having the same power as what about issues around death and mortality? Now, rites and ceremonies announce death, but the fundamental purpose is for the kinship and community to accept the reality of death. And the way they work it out is just a saying that if it is when death is not ready that you can say you have a doctor. That's it. That what can a doctor do for you? Because death is regarded as an agent of God. And that if it's ready, you're just wasting your time. It's just a basic waste of time. And that when that is ready, there is no sacrifice that works. Where you may disagree with them a little bit is this cause of death. They worry about this cause of death so much. They worry about it. And in the last 2 days, people have spoken about HIV and AIDS. They worry about things like that. And they hide it. They hide it in families. Because anything that is interpreted as shameful is regarded as damaging this one. They don't want to say, you can't tell Americans this, don't leave large debts behind. They come from a debt culture. You can't leave large debts behind. And then they worry about character flaws so much that, look, do not damage your character because you are creating problems for yourself. So they say, look, just try to behave gently so that you can die peacefully, so that your children can stretch out their hands upon us in burial. Death, burial, They are like geographies in which they announce success, they announce the people you know, they announce dignity, and they use it to tie to identities, issues of land connecting to identity, and they feast. They do a lot of feasting unless you die young. They have to feast. In other words, it's not regarded as a permanent sense of loss or the fear of extinction. And they have to tell stories, so many stories about you, and they have to link issues to afterlife. The image of the abode of dead is treated as somewhere that you can reach, and that the dead does not reside in the grave, but is a member. In fact, in the past, after burial, they will do a shrine for you in the house. Bear in mind, until the modern state is forcing them to bury you in cemeteries, you bury in the house. Actually, among my people, you bury the person in the living room, in his living room. So after he's dead, you are that same living room that you put your television. That's where you're supposed to be buried, so that you are part of the living. You are not gone. And when people pray, they pray to you. They pray to you in that space, as if you are with them, which is to say that the living and the dead are connected, and that you can be socialized just as you are socialized into the living, you are socialized into the world of the dead, in which you are connecting both. So the dead is a living person. It's a living person. It's different from the idea of resurrection. You are a living person in the sense that they walk you back. So today we deal with issues of contemporary poverty that Elias spoke about in the first lecture, health crisis, and so many issues that you are familiar with. But the connections between the past and the present are still retained. What people expect religions to do for them still resemble what they did in the past. This is a Christian hymn from my church, in which if I were to say, I can remove Christianity from it and call it Yoruba religion. It is a hymn that draws from template of Yoruba beliefs that let's have money. And there are so many Christian hymns talking about children, written by Africans, that they sing. Hymns in which, so let's have money, let's have long life, let's have many children, and do not let us bring ourselves to shame. Western medicine and Western desire have not damaged many ideas. There have been inroads of many influences, the transplanting of Western ideas to Africa, but they are within a template in which culture of the past keeps imposing meaning. There are non-governmental organizations, there are churches that are doing many things. Modern medicine is affected by world religions. Many ideas do draw on conventions of the past. Let me now close. So we are dealing with shortages of facilities. We are dealing with issues of mismanagement, issues around corruption. But many traditional ideas have survived. They've survived. Should we ridicule some of these ideas? I don't think we should ridicule them. Because they work, they've carried them to the present, they've modified some of them. So what should we do? I think we should learn to integrate them with modern medicine, the values of living in the modern world. Indeed, many Africans continue to rely on traditional medicine or to use Western medicine in the context of traditional values. Those are two ideas. Some use the traditional one, or some just use the Western one in the context of traditional values. Just let me give you one example that is so common in West Africa: injection. If you go to the doctor and he gives you tablets, they think that is less effective than an injection. It's based on an old idea of incision that the old herbalists used to do. That which touches the blood has more efficacy is an older idea. The focus on three aspects: the body, the mind, and the medicine to cure serious illnesses remains grounded in established beliefs and faith. Christianity and Islam have appropriated various aspects of beliefs in the traditional system while adding their own. Faith and beliefs remain important components of health in Africa. Millions of people believe in witchcraft. There's nothing we can do about that. They believe in evil eye. There's nothing we can do about that. And it has nothing to do with education. People with PhDs believe in it. And they also believe in the negative forces that destroy them. They just believe that there are negative forces. Modern medicine has to respect these individuals, their beliefs, and their faith. World religions have been translated into local idioms. That is, they have been domesticated to incorporate elements drawn from indigenous cultures. Islam and Christianity are not just about salvation, they are also presented as this worldly. Beliefs about the power of dreams, evil forces, witchcraft, and others remain part of the mindset of millions of Africans. The main source of support in health matters is still organized around kinship, an informal set of relationships that connects various generations in the same space. Kinship allows beliefs and ideas to circulate with acceptance and consensus, and at the same time ensuring that future members are socialized into a set of cultural beliefs. Family and community supports remain strong, and even in cities, and even among those in modern occupations. This is an area where African values are positive and must be maintained. Families enforce therapy, care for the sick, prevent the spread of disease and illness with early warnings. African culture is grounded in life support, and established elements in it have been endured for centuries. Should be encouraged to continue and integrated into formal Western-oriented practices to take care of everyone, especially the struggling poor and the weak. The benefits derived from, and this is my last sentence, the benefits derived from life-supporting belief systems should not be lost to modernity and the expansion of capitalism and attendant technologies. Thank you.
Thank you for so much. I'm sure this is the kind of lecture we expected from him. So thank you. We are very happy to have you here. Okay, so let's take a few questions. Let's take it one after the other. Yes, please.
In the next 30 years, population growth is expected to be a huge issue. As you talked about, wealth is in families. And feeding people is also a dignity issue. How do we be respectful of children as the wealth and still manage to feed a growing population?
Thank you. And bear in mind that that argument is also contested. So some people will put it this way, that you have the second biggest continent in the world, next to Asia, with a population same as that of India. Africa is 1 billion people. It's just, this year is going to become 1 billion. India is over 1 billion. Some people will say that it is actually underpopulated, not overpopulated. The problem is the disconnect between management, resource creation, and distribution. And they will say, for instance, that are we not talking about state failure in relation to this population issue? Whereby a country like Nigeria with enormous oil resources, right, has an incapable leadership that cannot use its resources to feed its people. Consequently, that we are magnifying, right, issues of population when in actual fact the trouble is that of state mismanagement. Indeed, there is yet another argument that they are using primitive technologies to produce food. The machete and the hose, they call it cutlass in Africa, machete here. That what can that do? That those limited technologies may not be sufficient to produce enough food. Some people have made two arguments that look, Cameroon alone can feed the entire African continent if the agric is solid. Or some people make the argument what they call the cassava option, that carbohydrate, starch is not the problem, that the problem is protein. So I'm just trying to complicate this question, that some people say the way you say it, that there's a lot of population, and some people say, look, this population is not even enough, that the market expansion is not as impressive as you have there because they don't have that population to consume, and that market can expand if resources are carefully managed. But if I were to now accept your own proposition as to high population, this is how my mom resolved it, because I will give you my mother's answer. I come from one of the biggest cities in West Africa called Ibadan. So I went to my mom one day. I said, this city is too big. There are too many houses. My mom said, you don't talk like that. My mom said, it's after you've built your own house. Now you can begin to say we have too many houses. So when I did not marry early enough for my mom because I married after my PhD. And she used to be disturbed. And then I would go to her, I said, you know, there are too many people. He said, you can't say there are too many people. First of all, produce your own children and then join them in managing the people. Yes, sir.
Thank you for your paper. I couldn't help but think of when you were presenting on this idea of children as sort of the identification of one's wealth and one's status as maybe perhaps one's virtue. I really like that idea, and I certainly appreciate that cultural sensibility of the African people. But my question for you is, we know that there is currently a huge multi-billion-dollar push by the United Nations, spearheaded largely by the United States, to increase the amount of contraception.
Because we are wearing the same color.
Yes, to increase use of contraception on the African continent. That seems to fly in the face. So how does that conversation, what are your thoughts on that dialogue, if you will?
Okay. I'm going here because they are recording part of this conversation. They asked me to be close to this. Say, I don't know how many of you have been to Cairo or Algeria or Tunisia, and I've been there many times. They turn the condoms into balloons. They just blow them. You see, the first lecture was, and I was talking to the sister sitting by your left, was consumed by the issues of the condom, and we missed various brilliant aspects of that lecture. There's politics, in which the NGOs and people releasing the money, people have to agree with them, even when they don't mean it. So, because if you want to tap into Washington's money, you have to fake, you have to say you agree with it. So when the Democrats are in power, they will accept the condom and throw them away. When the Republicans are in power, they will say we are not accepting the condom. This politics is very well established. But let's break it down into pieces. Take Africa, take North Africa, take the northern belt of West Africa. That's Islamic. You already know that these are not condom regimes, right? So you are down to South Africa, Central Africa, the southern belt of West Africa, right? So you can correlate Christianity with condom. That's where the argument can really sell. You're not going to go to northern Nigeria and sell this idea. I mean, you're just basically wasting your time. And where Western education has spread effectively, you have the rise of nuclear families. I have 3 children. And my colleagues here, I'm not sure, I think one of them has 2 kids, 2 of them have 2. So modernity, Western education in most of Africa, they've also created families that look like yours, in which nobody has to preach to them anymore to reduce the number of them. Bear in mind, these kids are no longer dying. The real problem, as in that of the first lecture, and I was telling the sister that it's more of a political issue than a religious argument, is what do you do in cases like Botswana, South Africa, where there is incidents of HIVs and AIDS? What do you do in those places? And so I see many of these contradictions, but bear in mind that I don't think there's a one approach reaction to, I think there are multiple reactions to what is going on here. Depending on the regions, the extent of modernization, the penetration of Western education, and the strength of Islam, they all affect what is going on in relation to your subject. In relation to your question. Yes, sir.
Yes, you talked about the causation of sickness and disease, and you did a good job of showing us how, in most cases, it's not just one thing, it's not just physical. What about the social networks and things? And I think in Western medicine, we've done harm by breaking that apart. But one of the questions I have is if you move into, say, an African context and you talk about the cause of illness, is it more of an arbitrary thing? For example, if God is good, can God or spiritual forces arbitrarily cause you to be ill? Or is there somehow, at least in a Christian response, if God is good, then we don't attribute to God evil actions, while maybe in a more traditional context, spiritual forces are arbitrary and cause and effect are by chance and fate. I mean, how does the understanding of God as a good God protect his reputation, if you will?
Mm-hmm. Well, we have a pastor here who will do who understands that question much better than I. But I understand the indigenous conception of it. So here is the way it's framed in terms of local idioms, right? Which has been redefined into some kind of Christian repackaging. So there's a strong belief in destiny. It's very strong. A number of Americans don't have a concept of luck, a concept of destiny. They have a concept of hard work, that what I get is because I work for it. Traditional societies don't think that way. They have a concept of destiny, that it is not you who choose to become a professor of history. It is that you can't just say you want to become a professor of history. That is an act of destiny. Before you are born, when your mom is pregnant, it's been stamped into you that this is what you are going to become. But that evil forces can negate it, in which a God who is quiet and silent, right, allows you to mediate those struggles while leaving himself as a final arbiter in terms of how you successfully mediate it through sacrifice, through rituals, and through character. So I think they mediate it. And some people argue that some African cultures have a different notion of a supreme deity, and now what we do is to take the God in the Bible and the God in the Quran and impose that biblical God onto their worldview, including the notions of sin, whereas they're so quiet in terms of this supreme being, and they just leave him. There is I love telling this alienation story. It's just a Yoruba alienation story. I love this story. I want to tell you that God used to live with us. We used to be able to see him. He has an address. You can go to his house, and people will actually go into his house to request favor, but they will not let him sleep. 24 hours, they won't let him sleep. So one day God said, okay, why don't you meet me at the stadium and make all your requests so that you don't have to keep coming? And then he granted them all their requests. You know what they did? They did not leave God alone. They didn't leave him alone because they wanted to change the request. On the day they made the request, a short person said, God, I'm too short. Make me tall. The one with them, a nose, complained about the nose. The woman complained, men complained. And then 3 days later, they began to complain. And God said, I am going. You will never see me again. And he got angry. And ever since, we cannot see him again. If you pray, if you talk, we do not know when he's going to listen. Because you've annoyed him so much that he left in anger. So they have alienation stories and things like that to say, look, on the one hand, he's there for you. On the other hand, he's going to leave you to mediate all these struggles, giving you lesser spiritual agencies to deal with. The gods and the goddesses and mediators that you can negotiate with on your own terms. And you may win and you may also lose. And your destiny will now serve as the ultimate mediator in this struggle. That is the way it's explained, but I do not know. You will know this better than me in terms of how Christian theology has appropriated it. Because they appropriate many of these elements and actually use them to preach to church members. Sometimes forgetting that these are indigenous ideas. So in which they take the Bible and then Old Testament is so prominent. The Old Testament in African religion, somebody should do a book on it. Because the Old Testament works so well with African values. And they draw so many elements from Old Testament than from New Testament. My father likes reading about Solomon and his 300 wives.
I have a question about ancestors.
Please.
You talked about the importance of becoming an ancestor. So I had two questions. One, what does it mean to become an ancestor? And two, does the cause of death influence becoming an ancestor?
Very good. The cause of death influences it. So first of all, you must not die young. And you must not die without having children. And you cannot be an evil person. And you cannot have bad character. All those disqualify you from becoming an ancestor. Now, the ultimate thing is actually to become an ancestor. That is the dream. That is what you want to become. So bear in mind that in the past, you become yourself a god or a goddess. They worship you. They venerate you once you are elevated to that status. So that just as you are praying to Jesus Christ, you pray to the ancestor. You say, my mom, my dad, right? You invoke them just as you are invoking a prophet. Because I like using myself a lot. Anytime I go through Nigeria, the first place I go is to my father's tomb. And anytime something is not going well with me, I always think it's because I have not invoked the spirit of my mom. Even, it's so powerful. And then my mom is dead, and then I will say, did I offend you? I said, I'm almost 60 years old, and I keep saying that. Even when I give a bad lecture, after the class, I will say, my mom, did I do something wrong? This is a dead person. Listen. This person died in the 80s, but she has enormous power on me. I tell people when they divorce that, look, part of what is causing this trouble is that there's no moral authority. I can't just say I'm divorcing my wife. It's just, it doesn't work, because I have many people I will say, what is my father going to say? He's dead. What is my mother going to say? What of my sister in Lagos? And you find somebody is from Eastern Nigeria, where they have thousands of them living in Houston. You can't just say you are divorcing your wife in Houston. You have to first of all go to Nigeria. You have to first of all go and obtain permission, in which the living is not just having sanctions on you, the death too is also having sanctions on you. So the way it worked in the past is far more complicated, because they turn you into a masquerade. And once in the year, especially around June, they bring back your spirit to the living. They have to parade you on the street that this is my dead father. So you know the mask that people use to decorate their houses? They are not decorative objects. You know, they are religious objects. The African masks that they now put in museums, they are not objects of decoration. You make a mask for your mom, for your dad. And once in a year, your dad is a masquerade. And then you say, my dad has come back, and then your dad prays for you, and then your dad goes all over the city praying for you and praying for other people. So the ancestor is not dead. The ancestor is a living organism. And that way, you are able to you are not creating a break. It's not a break. It's a transition in which that person that you think is dead is still living. And they call it ancestor veneration. It's Africans who call it ancestor veneration. In older ethnographies, Europeans call it ancestor worship. But it's not a dead idea. Some people still do it, but it's declining where you have an impact of modernity in Western education.
So, Father Brenner, you say that you want to die older. Is there an age?
That you should die?
Yeah. And
No.
what happens if a child dies?
Don't pray for that. Don't pray for that, because, and this is some aspect that you may not like. With all cultures have things that will displease you. It won't make you happy, because when I was teaching at the University of Cambridge, a colleague of mine lost a child, and it was a culture shock, because after the burial they did a reception. It was a real culture shock. I couldn't understand it. Now I've seen it happen, but I could not understand it. Because that is just the exact opposite from where I came from. Where I come from, even the parents cannot attend you are not supposed to see your child put into a grave. Talk less of drinking soda after it. You're not supposed to. And the idea, which is actually not dead but declining, is that that child can be reproduced. You have to be pregnant again to reproduce that child. You must bring that child back. Sometimes they will do a marking before they bury the person, and they believe that when this child is reborn, you will see the mark. I don't believe in many of these things myself, but I'm just telling you the belief. So I think that is a no-no, because that is a no-no. The other problem is, can you become an ancestor without a child? See, it's difficult, but cultures can be very clever. They can be very clever. Sometimes they do what is called ghost marriages, in which someone, not all cultures, some cultures do ghost marriages. So assuming I die without children, they can say my brother, same parents, can have a child on my behalf. And that child belongs to me, just to maintain that chain. And you better believe this, that we have people who actually think that somebody is their mom or their dad, and that person is not. And it's not an adoption. They just say, look, this person is barren, we just have to assist this person. And they just do it in a way in which from early childhood, the child has a consciousness that this person is the mom or the dad. I don't know, I think the pastor has to talk here, because this is an area where it is a big problem in African Christianity. How does Christianity resolve this paradigm that there's a woman, usually it's a woman, it's less men than women? I do not know how modern Christianity resolves this very fact that you can be alive without having a child. I don't know. I think you have to say something about this, how it's resolved, because it's a real problem. It's a real challenge.
Just like Paul said, the childlessness is something which is rejected in the African society. I mean, like he has also mentioned in the lecture, everyone prays to be able to get old, because that's the idea of immortality. What you and I conceive as eternity is, for the black man, immortality in the fact that you get to become an ancestor. And who is the person who is supposed to make the transition possible? Because there are certain rites and rituals that help you transit from death to ancestorhood. And it is your children who help in that process by doing the ceremonies, by carrying out the masquerade and stuff like that. That is facilitating the process from death to ancestorhood. So if you don't have a child, how are you going to transit? Therefore, the ghost will hang, the specter will hang around the community, causing trouble until that is done. So we have a second burial. And anyone who doesn't bury the parents properly, there are proper burial rituals. If they are not followed, then you're going to have a specter or a ghost that's going to haunt and terrorize the members of the family until that ritual is properly done. So today, like he has mentioned, you have marriages on the threshold of breaking where no child is born. And it's a problem in the church today, which we're trying to handle through, thank God for artificial insemination, which is giving a window of opportunity for some. Adoption is still something which is quite not wholly accepted. It's Western, but there's something about the blood continuation which is not there when you're adopting a child. So Those are the dynamics which I was struggling with, and I don't think anyone could have presented the perspective of the worldview better than what Prof has done. So those are the struggles we're dealing with, but you need to understand it for you to be able to now talk about health or medicine or sickness or wholeness. I found it very interesting when they talked about the concept of alafia. That is the traditional concept of what the Old Testament Hebrews will call shalom, or what in the New Testament we'll call so, which is a holistic dimension of healing. But we already have that, and that is alafia. It's a whole concept.
But when you talked about the Old Testament being such a critical portion of Scripture, what about all the Old Testament stories of infertility in the Bible? Does that help at all to minister to infertility?
Now, we'll go back to the Old Testament. Don't forget, the New Testament is just addressing issues from the Old Testament, addressing issues that the church is facing in trying to plant the church in communities. Well, what does the Lord say? There shall not be any barren in the land. And our people in Africa hold on to the text. There shall not be any barren in the land. That is my promise. And I'm going to claim it. Irrespective of what the doctors say, irrespective of the fact that I have no womb, there shall be none that is barren in the land, period.
The aspect I don't like about this, and the one aspect I don't like, because I don't like the aspect in which it drives men to having a second wife. That one bothers me a little bit. And I have dealt with so many situations in which having trouble even by the resolution, because the people, and you have to forgive me, who starts this problem is usually the mother of the man. By the second year after a wedding, the man's mom will be saying, "Why is your wife not pregnant?" Go, and then by the 5th year, they will say, "Look, you must go and have a mistress." I don't like that aspect. Because in some cases, it actually may also be the man's fault. The other aspect I don't like, and this is changing among my generation, is a preference for a male child. You're not just talking about having children, you must have a son. That also is changing. Where the pressure is intense, we have situations in which somebody will, in hiding, marry another woman. Unfortunately, we do not know, and this is not a joke, until a successful African is dead, you cannot know the number of wives he has. It is at the burial ceremony, the funeral, that you can know. In fact, I joke with my wife that you don't know whether I have a wife. I don't know why. Because it's you have to wait till I'm dead. So because I have a friend who rose to become the Minister of Justice in Nigeria, and his wife was a prominent judge. It was the wife. This is a highly educated person. Died a few months after this man's death because he said, "My husband did this." Because he said, not one, not two. How was he able to hide it for 40 years? Because there's also a complicity with women too, as second wives, in which they know that you're legally married, you're supposed to, because there's bigamy in the law book, you're not supposed to have 2 wives. So they actually protect you by saying, well, they already have a child for you, but they will protect you. They will actually protect your first wife, unless you don't give them maintenance money. Then they will say, okay, let's fight. Otherwise, they will protect you, and it's we can laugh over it, but it's very painful It's a very painful experience as far as I'm concerned.
And could you comment on the age, where I asked you about the age that you
Okay, now very good. You can take the biblical age, the 70, but bear in mind that in agrarian societies, it is not fixed in terms of the calendar, like 70, like 80. It's fixed in terms of generation. It's a generation concept in which you've produced, your children have produced, and then you become an elder, and then you have the right, you've earned the right to die. You're actually supposed to even, some people actually call meetings before they die and say, look, I think I've had enough. I want to die. Not that they're going to commit suicide. They just say, look, I've seen my children succeed, I have grandchildren, I'm fulfilled. What am I waiting for? As a way of saying they want to make it less painful to those that they leave behind.
Okay. Please, thank you so much.
Thank you.